We'll wait just a couple of minutes before we get started. I do want to thank everybody for participating today. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started. My name is Jeff Goldhagen. I'm a pediatrician with the University of Florida in Jacksonville, Florida, and president of the International Society for Social Pediatrics and Child Health. For those of you who have been with us, we want to welcome you back. For those of you who are with us for the first time, we want to welcome you. This is I think the 7th session of a series that ISSOP has been presenting on the intersection of pediatrics and child health, focused on the impact of climate change and the crisis on children, with the expectation then that we will sustain this work to create and establish a global collaborative of individuals and organizations who are focused and committed to addressing the critical issues impacting children as it relates to climate change. For those of you who are not familiar with ISSOP, ISSOP is the International Society for Social Pediatrics and Child Health. We've been around for more than 4 decades. We are the only entity, global entity, that is focused at the intersection of child health and social pediatrics, or social child health. We are an organization of physicians, nurses, and other stakeholders who are committed to addressing global issues, and in particular social and environmental determinants of health, both nationally as well as globally. And we welcome you to participate with us. We welcome you to join ISSOP, which you can go onto our website at issop.org, ISSOP.org. There you will find not only a portfolio of our work, but also in particular as it relates to climate change, our declaration on climate change. And we'll be sending that out to folks so that you can use that as you see fit, and hopefully be able to introduce and work with some of those issues in your own, excuse me, in your own communities around the world. So we have representatives and members all around the world, and we really welcome you to participate with us. Before I go further, I just want to note that UNICEF just recently, as of this week or last week, released a tremendously important volume on children and climate change. And if you haven't had a chance to look at that, I would suggest that you can go online and download it. I want to thank Miguel Perez, who has over these months been really helpful and been running our IT and platform. He's done a superb job. And Eva Goldhagen, who's really taken the lead in organizing this work. All of our previous sessions are on our YouTube site. Again, you can just go to YouTube, search for ISSOP, ISSOP, and you will see all of our previous recordings of the primary sessions. We do also provide these sessions with captioning in French and Spanish. And so those are available also. And today you will also be able to link to a room that has captioning in Spanish and or French, as well as our main room. Our format is that we will. I'll be introducing Nathan Uckman, who is our moderator for today. He will be introducing our speakers. Once that introduction is complete, then we will go into our presentations, which are pre-recorded And then once those recordings are completed, then you'll be transported back into our main room, where we'll open the discussion period through our question and answer period. Once that's complete, then we will break out into breakout sessions, which again are framed in the context of regional areas. And we really would hope that you can stay with us as long as possible during those breakout sessions. There's where we record those breakout sessions, and then we'll be collating the results of those sessions so that we have the insights from people around the world as to how we can together mobilize strategically to address the critical issues impacting the climate crisis as it relates to children. It's been just as a obvious anecdote when we started these sessions 8 months ago in the middle of COVID. And before the summer season up north, for sure, there was it was a critical issue. Now we are seeing on a daily basis what's happening all through the world, and the crisis continues to increase. And the importance of this work, I think, is emphasized almost on a daily basis. So I'm going to stop here again. Thank you for participating. Thank you in advance for joining ISSOP and joining our global efforts as it relates to addressing the critical issues that are impacting children. As it's really very clear to all of us that the more of us that are working together, the stronger our voice and the greater impact that we can have. So please join us and take a leadership role. We need everybody's passion, experience, knowledge, insights in order to be able to accomplish what we all want to accomplish. So I'm going to stop here, turn it over to Nathan Uckman, who is our moderator for today. I've known Nathan now for about 2 years. And I can tell you that in my career, I've never met a person more passionate, more insightful, more concerned, in particular about the issues related to climate change than Nathan. There isn't a day that we talk that I don't learn something from him. And so Nathan, let me just say personally, thank you for your leadership and thank you for your passion in serving as a catalyst for us all to move us forward in this journey together. So Nathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff. It's an honor to have this opportunity to moderate this session and also to connect with advocates and allies and friends around the world. I do feel a great sense of solidarity and shared passion being together with you and knowing how much you all care about children, and also ensuring that every child everywhere is able to live a full life with health and rights that are actualized and be on a beautiful, thriving planet where people and planets and children, most especially, can flourish together. So thank you all for joining, and just a word about how this space will be in our brief time together. I hope that this is either a reconnection and the beginning of a journey that will continue together. Just to emphasize that, as Jeff has mentioned, ISSOP is a welcoming space. We are a growing community, and we are passionate and very committed to the lifelong journey of advocating on behalf of both children and a livable planet. So I'll shift to introduce briefly both Susan Prescott and Susan Keino. I'm honored to call both of these Susans my friends, and am really looking forward to hearing what they have to share. So I will briefly do an introduction of both of them and mention how I connected and why I think that they are perfectly placed to share about the topic today about planetary pediatrics and the connection to child health, and in particularly related to climate change and advocating for climate justice. So Susan Prescott is, to me, an inspiration, having done amazing work, both specifically for children and also in the realm of planetary health. So being a fellow pediatrician, she was a natural fit, who I was so honored and excited whenever she agreed to present today. And Susan Keino, I had the privilege of connecting with her in April whenever we presented together for the East Africa hub of the Planetary Health Alliance. And as she was presenting her work as a nutritionist and related to children and communities, I thought that she would be a perfect complement, because ultimately in the planetary health space and the climate advocacy space, it's important that we are as diverse as possible and recognize how essential everyone's contributions are. And so I think there will be a great synergy and complementarity between the two different presentations. So we will start with Susan Prescott's presentation. So I'll just read her bio for you, and then after her presentation, I will read the bio for Susan Keino as well. So Susan Prescott, Professor Susan Prescott is an MD and PhD. She's a pediatrician, immunologist, and internationally acclaimed physician scientist, well known for her cutting-edge research into the early environmental determinants of health and disease. Globally, she is recognized for her work on the interconnections between human health and planetary health, and promoting mutualistic value systems for both ecological and social justice. She is founding president of In Vivo Planetary Health and editor-in-chief of Challenges Journal, which promotes interdisciplinary discourse. Locally in Western Australia, she is director of the Origins Project, an intervention birth cohort of 10,000 families aimed at improving all aspects of long-term physical and mental health. Previously, she was the founding president of the Dohad Society, Developmental Origins of Health and Disease of Australia and New Zealand, and a director of the World Allergy Organization. In addition to over 300 scientific publications, Susan is also an artist and award-winning author of several books: The Allergy Epidemic, The Calling, Origins, and gold medal winning book, The Secret Life of Your Microbiome. Her inspiration to study medicine came from her grandmother, one of the few women to study medicine in the 1930s. So I'll invite Miguel to get the presentation rolling, and looking forward to what's to come. Thank you all.
Thank you. I also want to make a note that the Spanish viewing room and the French viewing room are now open, and you can get to those by clicking the breakout room button on the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen.
Miguel, I
Hi
cannot
everyone, it's wonderful to be here, and I really want to begin by thanking the organisers for this
yes.
opportunity to speak to you today. I'm a paediatrician and an immunologist, but today I'm mostly talking to you in my capacity as the president of In Vivo Planetary Health. The goal of this talk is really to frame child health in the wider context of all of our interconnected grand challenges, and really underscore the importance of taking a developmental and life course and transgenerational approach to health. As paediatricians, we are ideally placed to reinforce the perspective that taking the long view will not only change our future, but also who we are right now. I'm also going to talk about the need for imaginative solutions that build on the very best of human nature, the deeper values that unite, empower, and refocus priorities of individuals and groups towards healthier futures. The Anthropocene has been an era of profound ecological imbalance affecting health on all scales. Humanity has affected planetary systems to such an extent that our own well-being is under threat. Declining human health really reflects ecosystem disruption on all scales. So restoring health must depend on an ecological perspective, and that must begin from the very first moments of life. So planetary health is concerned with far more than climate change and biodiversity loss. It really spans all systems on all scales, from the largest to the smallest, recognising that these are all interconnected and all are interdependent. Our physical, social, economic, political and spiritual climates are all inextricably linked to human health. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we were dealing with a global NCD crisis inextricably linked to the erosion of all of these interdependent ecosystems. This pandemic in slow motion really closely parallels environmental changes at the macro and the micro scales, and virtually all of these conditions have their origins in very early life. We're seeing progressively younger phenotypes with childhood epidemics of metabolic and immune disorders, emotional distress, and anxiety. Allergy is one of the most striking measures of early environmental impact. In countries like Australia, we see 1 in 4 infants now with some form of allergic disease. So this is really a sentinel, an early indicator of environmental impact on our immune health, a canary in the coal mine with much wider implications for human and environmental health. Our birds are also quite literally dying. We've seen massive declines in bird species as an indicator of ecosystems' health at a much larger scale. We're seeing a parallel collapse of insect species and pollinators, which of course are integral for the entire global food web. The health of every ecosystem depends on the health of its smallest parts, such as the microorganisms which are critical to large-scale systems like climate biology, right through to the health of each individual organism. But urbanisation has had large-scale effects on biodiversity loss, echoed through to the microecological scale, from soil microbes to our own personal microbial ecosystems. Allergy was one of the first fields to link biodiversity loss to human health, particularly the loss of microbial biodiversity and immune health. Now, of course, we see that dysbiotic drift is implicated in many NCDs, as we see evidence of disappearing microbes in many westernised populations. In other words, there's a direct line between life in distress at the cellular scale and life in distress at the planetary scale, with drivers of inflammation and dysbiosis echoed through on every level. In another sense, as paediatricians, we can regard this as failure to thrive on all scales. The omics revolution has given us biological measures of the total exposome and ways in which we can draw direct lines between microscale and planetary systems. This calls for much greater awareness of these complex bidirectional relationships. We really must take an integrated perspective that recognises how factors in our wider environment echo through on every level and influence our biology across time, including the epigenetic transgenerational effects on our DNA. The ecology of the early environment really determines our lifelong health, including our microbial diversity, nutrition, nature, and social interactions during this critical window of development. Immune health in particular is core to all aspects of physical and mental development, and it determines both our acute and our chronic vulnerabilities. Our greatest battle of the 20th century was arguably our war on microbes, and it has taken us decades to learn that this is not the solution and is actually implicated in the epidemic of so many early onset NCDs, raising, of course, new concerns about the increasing use of detergents, disinfectants, and antibiotics. In many ways, we're looking at an extinction of experience. We've seen significant changes in human behaviour with modernity, with progressively more time indoors, less contact with biodiversity and natural environments. And this has significant implications in the post-COVID era. Technology culture, while incredibly important for situations like this, does have implications. We have digital displacement of in-person experiences, nature and social interaction, which is all having impacts on our physical and mental health. We know that screen time promotes many pro-inflammatory behaviours and risks for NCDs, including stress, our eating behaviour, nature deficit, as I've mentioned, inactivity and sleep disturbance. Our extinction of experience is multidimensional, and usually the focus of these discussions is much more on the toxic exposures, the increasing presence of detrimental factors. And we place far less emphasis on the increasing absence of protective and buffering factors, such as nature, traditional foods, physicality, community, positive emotions, mindfulness, and spirituality, which are often neglected in this conversation. This really highlights the importance of ecological solutions for lifelong resilience. So we need much more focus on the positive factors. For example, promoting nature connection has multiple benefits in children, ranging from dietary habits, exercise, sleep, performance, social and emotional assets, and of course, skin and gut microbiome diversity. But it also creates a greater sense of environmental concern. Our goal must extend beyond merely the absence of disease, but to thriving and flourishing on all scales. As paediatricians, we are particularly attuned to concepts of thriving and the importance of positive emotional assets in addition to physical environments. And we are ideally placed to promote the long-term health benefits for individuals and societies and address child health with planetary health in mind. All of these physical and emotional assets promote immune resilience and protect and buffer inflammation, disease, and premature aging. And this is the basis for our local effort, the Origins Project. This is a large community cohort of 10,000 families with the overarching aim of a healthy start for a better future. And we're already more than halfway through recruitment. We have both observational domains and nested harmonised interventions. And in general terms, our interventions are aimed at minimising the negative or adverse exposures, restoring the positive and protective factors, and building a community that enables this. In particular, we're interested in upstream approaches to wellness behaviour to see whether these have a flow-on effect to the usual risk factors, anticipating multiple benefits for individuals, families and communities. So please visit our website for more information. We believe that local projects are part of the solution in every community, and that a greater sense of belonging and purpose improve physical and mental health of individuals and society and buffer the stress of social disadvantage. All of this underscores the power of interconnected grassroots strategies for planetary health as a path to new normative values, and emphasises that connectivity is a vital part of the solutions. It's time to overcome the fragmented territorial approaches and siloed thinking as major obstacles in understanding health of all systems. We need a much more dynamic understanding of life, which empowers more agile, cohesive, caring and sustainable solutions. Starting at the grassroots does not just mean foundational ecosystems, it also means addressing the foundational value systems and getting to the roots of the problems where all change must begin, at the deep stories that shape cultural identity, belief systems, and normative values. The grand challenges of the Anthropocene are largely of our making and ultimately stem from human attitudes to each other and to our environment. The solutions must also be of our making, recognising the interdependence of these challenges. Concepts of planetary health recognise these interwoven complexities, but they rarely confront the underlying value systems that created these interconnected problems in the first place, or the attitudes that perpetuate them. Too often, the agenda is dominated by the very worst of human nature, while the best of human nature is neglected and devalued. And I'm talking about the importance of kindness, hope, love, and mutual respect, the deeper values that unite, empower, and refocus priorities of groups and individuals. In doing so, we have failed to recognise that this is part of the problem and that these are arguably our greatest assets in overcoming our biggest challenges. We need to normalise more mutualistic creative approaches, including the perspectives of traditional cultures. We must address the climate of growing conflict and confusion, which has long-term impact on physical and mental health and even biological ageing. Our society encourages a futile search for happiness rooted in a world of wasteful consumerism, and the endless hollow search for more usually only leads to unhappiness and disillusionment. Not to mention the gross economic disparities on the impact of health of individuals and societies, which only perpetuate inequalities. We need a greater appreciation that social status signals in early childhood adversely affect long-term attitudes and health behaviours, including our eating behaviours. Much of this is a reflection of the dysbiotic drift in underlying value systems, the increasingly narrow focus on economic and financial value, and a normative shift towards narcissism and self-interest. Broken systems are damaging health, the social fabric, and natural environment, and broken spirit is manifest in increasingly polarised agendas. Polarisation is often manufactured and magnified by vested interests on all sides. We're seeing an infodemic of propaganda and misinformation, manipulating perceptions. A creed of power and greed has dominated the global agenda, with power concentrated in the hands of a few. In any ecosystem, this dynamic is unsustainable. It is vital that we redefine progress and growth in much more meaningful ways and recognise that not all innovation is improvement. We must place greater value on deeper wisdom and ask ourselves, are we being wise ancestors? Technology, of course, is a vital part of the solutions, but we must apply this with much more mutualistic value systems as a compass. And to quote Renee DeBoz, lest we end up with a jumble of technologies and counter-technologies that smother body and soul. So the planetary health agenda should equally consider our social and spiritual ecology as it does the ecology of our natural systems. Planetary health, therefore, is much more than an ecobiological framework. It speaks to the emotional and spiritual bonds between person and place and underscores the importance of stories of place that speak to the heart as much as the intellect. Our future depends on narratives that promote attitudes and behaviours that will shift the health trajectory, especially in our children. The power of narrative lies not just in how we see the world, but how we see ourselves and our power to change this. And listening to the voices of children is really a neglected dimension of this agenda. Our focus is so intent on helping them that we forget the ways in which they help us. Children have a way of reminding us what is important and helping us see the world in inspiring and refreshing new ways. Children provide a very powerful door, not just to have these bigger conversations for change, but to the inspiration we need to fuel us on that path. Individuals have enormous power, but there is every effort to maintain the status quo and distract us with false, polarizing narratives which promote powerlessness and hopelessness. It is time to raise awareness of the algorithms behind the curtain. Awareness changes everything, and we can lift that curtain. Awareness is really the first step towards transformation as individuals and societies. It allows us to see both challenges and possibilities and make meaningful choices. We need greater mindful awareness of our own attitudes to ourselves, to others, and to all things. This means expanding from simply an intellectual perspective to the true experience of connectivity and the awe, the wonder, the gratitude, and hope. It means unleashing our creative power to imagine a better future, recognizing that our thoughts and shared imaginings are more powerful than we realize. In the coming years, we at InVivo seek to place a much higher value on creativity, imagination, and self-development in solving challenges at all scales, recognizing that these also mediate social responsibility and environmental concern. It's time, in other words, to employ all of our resources and value our humanity as much as our technology, and using our hearts as well as our minds should not really be such a radical concept. We seek to emphasise the importance of cultural expression, artistic creations and narratives in linking the health of people, places and planet, as we encourage people to work in the spaces between silos of expertise. And this, of course, is something that everyone can be part of, because improving planetary health should not be by invitation only and all are qualified to join. Changing mindsets can change everything. It's the real roots of everything we do as individuals and societies, and the most powerful thing we can change as individuals. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a global tipping point. The economic fallout alone means that we can't simply return to where we were. It's a time to reassess collective values, priorities, our sense of self and community, hopefully as a gateway to a more resilient future. It has been a time of sudden and unprecedented change and shown us just how personal planetary health can be. It's also shown us how rapidly we can change our priorities and behaviours. It's been a wake-up call to so many broken and dysbiotic systems and an opportunity to shift that ultimate trajectory. Restoring resilience after a pandemic should not just be about restoring the status quo. It must be about restoring hope and purpose, more vibrant communities, opportunity and equity, and social and economic and environmental justice. In so many ways, the impact of the pandemic has been so great because our systems have been so unhealthy. That applies at both the level of our personal immunity as well as at the planetary scale. For all of us, this has been a time to reassess our personal priorities, an opportunity to change the way we live on the other side. The century-old words of Japanese poet Masahide remind us of how traumatic events can provide new opportunities for awareness that lead to wisdom and growth. With my barn burned down, nothing obstructs my view of the moon overhead. And this is at the heart of contemporary post-traumatic growth research, which goes beyond recovering to a previous state or situation, but to one of far greater awareness, purpose, meaning, and appreciation of life. And certainly 2020 has been a year of mass trauma. It has unmasked many chronic problems, and breaking that status quo may also provide opportunities to accelerate change. So what applies to personal growth may equally apply at the collective scales. So the hope is that this will lead to new awareness for growth at all scales, because what once seemed impossible has now become essential. The aftermath of this mass trauma provides opportunities for large-scale post-traumatic growth, reappraisal of values with higher levels of environmental and social concerns, and greater awareness of new possibilities and shared wisdom. So certainly we can consider what we do as individuals as we strive to be part of the solutions through our personal commitment to shaping change in all aspects of our daily life. But we can also contribute to a greater change narrative, recognizing that connectivity and shared purpose magnify change. We know that when we begin any journey, even small changes can signal important shifts in our long-term health trajectories, and that applies to our personal health behaviours as well as our wider value systems. So we should not underestimate the ripple effects of small changes. We've just seen the enormous consequence of the pandemic and the ripple effects of contagions, of fear, social and economic upheaval. Now more than ever is the time to initiate a contagion of positive change. Imagining the future is the first step to getting there, and we might all begin by asking ourselves what kind of world we want to live in. And this is very much the agenda of In Vivo Planetary Health and the activities of Project Earthrise. So this is an opportunity to share with you the Canmore Declaration, which was a collaborative document prepared following the 2018 annual conference of In Vivo Planetary Health in Canmore, Alberta. And I'll briefly go through the 10 principles that have been summarised here. The first is personal commitment to shaping change, that we should aim to be part of the solution and strive to live by example with commitment to peace, mutualism, kindness, love, empathy, and increasing community cohesion. In other words, strive to embrace the principles and practice of planetary health in our daily lives. The second is values and purpose, that we promote attitudes, values, behaviours and relationships that enhance and align personal and planetary health. Human kindness, empathy, mutualism, responsibility, and reciprocity are vital for individual, community, society, and global good. The third is unity and integration. Planetary health is rooted in ancestral concepts of the unity of all life. Complex challenges require integrated solutions which seek to find connections and break down barriers. The fourth is sustainable flourishing. Planetary health strives for the interdependent vitality of natural and human ecosystems on all scales. This includes social, political, economic ecosystems that favour biodiversity, health, equity, and opportunity for thriving. The fifth is stories, imagination, and creativity. Embracing the power of creativity and imagination to promote awareness and wise solutions through shared stories of change. This includes traditional knowledge and sciences and underscores the importance of every member in every community. The sixth is connection to nature. The importance of emotional connections to the land, to nature and its biodiversity, to inspire awe, wonder, emotional resilience, creativity and connections to community and actions to care for the environment. Promote the numerous benefits of contact with nature for physical and mental health, including healthier microbiomes. The seventh is planetary consciousness. Commitment to self-awareness, wisdom, cultural competency, and critical consciousness. To promote mutualistic attitudes and challenge misinformation, oppression, and inequalities. The eighth is the interdependence and connectivity of all life. All things are connected, from the microbes that form the foundations of all ecosystems to the larger planetary systems. Mutualistic ecology is vital for thriving on all scales from the very first moments of life. 9, to counter elitism and authoritarianism. We must work to overcome social dominance and marginalisation through empathy, empowerment, meaningful community engagement and partnerships, to be aware of motivations and hidden agendas, promote truth, and place greater value on wisdom. The 10th is advocacy, to promote a planetary health mindset throughout society, beginning with early life education, to lead by example, encourage unity and concepts of interconnectivity, to imagine and enable ways of living that promote flourishing of people, places and planet. And you can read more about this in the Canmore Declaration in our journal, Our Challenges. And we want to invite all of you to join our ongoing campfire discussions and the repository of many virtual sessions on a wide range of topics, and to invite you to join our next annual meeting in December this year. We also welcome submissions to our journal challenges. And finally, to conclude, I want to play a brief 90-second video that captures so many of the things that I've been talking about today. And I want to once again thank the organisers for this invitation and the wonderful opportunity to share with you today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are signing from. My name is Susan Keino from Moi University. I'm going to take you through this presentation on organizing for change, planetary pediatrics, and One Health in Kenya. So to start us off, we will look at the content of this presentation. First, we look at introduction to a changing world, and then we look at impacts of climate change on children, and then impacts of climate change on food security, as well as my experience with planetary health and One Health in Kenya. So you find that climate change is the overarching cause for many of the problems that children encounter in the world today. And with climate change comes so many other issues like natural disasters. And with natural disasters, we see floods, we see other things like wildfires and things like that are coming up, and the most vulnerable people and the most affected end up being children. We have unplanned pregnancies that come up as a result of so many factors, and one of them is recently is the issue of COVID-19 that affected children when schools closed. You found that children ended up staying at home and fell into pregnancies, and some of them cannot even go to school at the moment. We have unstable home environments. We know that the world today is changing. Our homes are becoming unconducive for children to be brought up, and children end up leaving their homes because of seeking for safety, and they end up in the streets, and so many other factors. Child labor is increasing because of economic times are very hard, and children are trying to make a living, and therefore they find themselves in the streets and or out there looking for jobs or looking for money to come and sustain the livelihood of their households. And then child marriages goes together with unplanned pregnancies, whereby children with unstable home environments, with circumstances at home, you find children end up getting married as early as 12, 13. Even with communities in Kenya, we have communities that marry off children. And you find that also issue of food security, insecurity come as a result of climate change and as a result of poverty within the homes, and therefore malnutrition is high among children. Violence also goes without say. There is a lot of violence within our homes, and children are exposed to violence at a very young age, and they end up being hospitalized because of injuries that come as a result of abuse, even within homes. Discrimination also among female gender. You find that there are families who decide to keep the girls at home as they send the boys to school for one reason or another, and therefore they are not able to access school because of discrimination or because of gender. Sexual exploitation also come as a result of the digital world that we have embraced, and many other factors that make children vulnerable. And you find there's a lot of child trafficking, there's a lot of exposure to children or to pornographic materials, and so many other things that are affecting the children in the world today. So climate change and its impact, we see Africa being threatened by climate change, and this comes as a result of many vulnerabilities. And Africa, for instance, we have very sensitive economies because our economic status for some countries in Africa is not very stable, and therefore we are not able to put in mitigation measures to prevent the deteriorating or degradation of the ecosystem. And also we are seeing very low resilience in terms of ability to bounce back and ability to protect its waters, to protect its forests. So we find that countries that have weak institutions, and there's poor governance, and there's corruption, they are not able to protect their ecosystem, and therefore it's exploited to a level whereby it cannot sustain our livelihood, and so many other factors like conflicts and many others. So we also see that poverty and climate change is affecting our children in a way. WHO shows that 8% of children of illness that and injuries and deaths that happen due to climate change are in children, particularly those living in underserved, poor and underserved populations. And climate change is altering weather patterns in ways that can affect the geographic range and incidence of health outcomes that are among the major killers of children. So we see a lot of malnutrition among children, especially undernutrition. We see diarrheal diseases, we see vector-borne diseases such as malaria, and so many others like typhoid, cholera, coming up as a result of this climate change. Also, as we said, diarrheal cases, 2.5 million children die annually because of diarrheal cases in Africa, and malaria causes an estimated 655 deaths among these children, as well as malnutrition is an underlying cause of death of half of the just under 7 million deaths globally in children. And if mitigation measures are not put in place to prevent the climate change continuing, then these numbers are bound to go up. And we see that with these risks that children are exposed to, they're still continuing at the moment, and in future we will see more of them if mitigation measures are put in place. So contamination of water, which cause a lot of diarrheal diseases, risk in temperatures, rise in temperature causes replication of certain pathogens, and we see emerging and re-emerging pandemics or coming up in many places. Flooding events that contaminate water treatment and spread of pathogens continue if mitigation measures are not put in place to prevent this occurring. An increase in pollen due to change in climate also increase allergic reactions as asthma, such as asthma that we see in children. So the impact of climate change make us ask ourselves that how is it in the 21st century that we still have 149 million children under 5 who are stunted, and also 50 million with wasting? And why are healthy diets becoming more expensive and unhealthy diets becoming more cheap? And why are children the most vulnerable to every element of a changing world as we see today? So we ask ourselves those questions. So all children have the right to a healthy diet and sustainable environment, but do they have access to all these? Those are questions that we need to keep asking ourselves. So we see with the UN member states adopting the Sustainable Development Goals in way back, I think in 2050, we are almost reaching 2030, and yet we have not really tackled what we said we will tackle as member states, and even as we pledged to leave no one behind, and we still see that this poverty is still on the rise, inequalities are still there, discrimination still affect our children, poor governance is still rampant among all these countries, and therefore we ask ourselves, with all this adoption of these MDGs, SDGs, and World Health Assembly targets, what have we done? Access to food is a human right, but is it available to everyone as a human right? So reality is that 2 in 3 children have not fed the minimum recommended diverse diet for healthy growth and development, and therefore we have seen this coming up, especially as a result of COVID. COVID exposed our fragile food systems, and with lockdowns and curfews, we see that many children being exposed to sexual exploitation. We see our food systems, of the fragile food systems not being able to sustain the population, as it were, increase in child labor, and so many other factors. And poverty levels are on the rise. And yes, in Kenya, we have counties whereby 79.4% of the population are poor. And among children who are orphans and vulnerable, 54.1% are actually poor. So yet we see SDGs, which actually are supposed to be protecting children. As many as 5 SDGs are key, especially 1 on education, 2 on hunger, 3 on health, education, gender equality, and climate change. But how much of these SDGs are able to, say that we are on target, and we are able to say that we have protected these rights of children. And 2030 is not very far from now, and what we have to say about it. So I will just go through my experience with Planetary Health and One Health in Kenya. Yes, it is. They are concepts that are being embraced in the world today. But how much of this Planetary Health, Planetary Pediatrics, One Health are we embracing as we organize ourselves for this change that is coming up, and put in place measures, and even grow a workforce that will go into coming up with solutions to the problems that the world is facing today. We know what health approach is. We see that it is the interface between human environments and animal, and we see a lot of the One Health approach recognizing the integral connections among human and animal, especially how it affects people's health and well-being. And with environmental factors that we see in the One Health concept, we see that a lot of climate change and environmental conditions permit species to become established in new areas and also introduced in other places because of trade and transit. And we also see ecologic determinants which may play a role in shaping a range of diseases vectors, for example, through climate, through vegetation, through soil and other conditions that influence habitat sustainability. Zoonotic and vector diseases, they have actually become the limelight lately because of some of the diseases that we are facing today, such as COVID and so many others that are cropping up across the planet. More than half of known pathogens infectious to humans are shared with animals, either via recurring transmissions or via spillover events. And globally, more than 1 billion infections and 1 million deaths annually are attributed to zoonotic diseases. And non-zoonotic disease in animals, we see that in ecosystem degradation and effects on species composition may affect service provided by a healthy ecosystem. And we find that with pollination, with clean water provision and protection against erosion may benefit public health in a way. But if that is not protected or kept in a good balance, you find that with the pollination, we have so many allergies among children. With poor access to clean water, we have all diarrheal diseases and all the other airborne, waterborne diseases coming up. So antimicrobial use, you find that this is excreted in manure with widespread dispersion into the environment if proper waste management is not in place. And we see this especially in Africa, whereby we depend on animal manure and organic manure to put in our farms for crop production. And it's a question that we ask ourselves, of that manure, especially that we bring from areas where we are living in close proximity with wild animals, and we transport it to our gardens and use it, how much of that manure is carrying pathogens that can come up and affect us as humans, as well as the antimicrobial use that we see, the antimicrobial or chemicals or medicine that we use, antibiotics. Yes, antibiotics that we use in our animals, they get excreted into the manure, and we utilize it in our farms. It goes into our crops and we consume it, and this affects the health of our children in one way or another. And it also imposes high cost on of animals and livestock losses. And in agricultural production, it also have an implication on international trade and may threaten food security at the end of the day. So in Moi University, we've been fortunate to participate in what we call One Health activities through an organization called Africa One Health University Network, whereby we It aims at expanding the human resource base needed to detect, respond to potential pandemic disease outbreak, and increase integration of animal, wildlife, and human disease surveillance and outbreak response system. And it also goes into building One Health workforce in pre-service and in-service workforce training for current and future workforce. And we see this in pre-service, whereby we are training students in multidisciplinary field experience, and also in-service, where we bring in people from the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, to undergo course trainings in risk analysis for such zoonotic diseases and AMR, among other courses, and faculty development in curriculum reviews, teaching, research, and community outreach. So I started participating in this organization in 2017, and we have seen quite a number of students go through this process, whereby they are taken to Amboseli Ecosystem and Panda Ranch Research Center, where they participate in research in identifying community One Health challenges. And we see students from School of Public Health coming together in a multidisciplinary training, whereby we have students from public health, students from medicine, students from nursing and other disciplines coming together to train from different universities. And during this training, they're able to go into the community and work together with the community and identify One Health challenges and come up with interventions. And some of the interventions that the students have come up with are indoor pollution solutions, hand washing, deworming of dogs, and so many others that they have worked with the community. So we find that the outcomes of these trainings include stakeholder meetings and engagement. We have reports that students write, as well as community engagement. So in Planetary Health, it is a new field. However, we were introduced to it way back in 2016, when we started working with the University of Toronto, and we have adopted a course, Planetary Health, with two versions of it, a 12-week training and a 6-week training, where we bring students from Kenya and students from Toronto learning together virtually, and they come up with solutions to challenges that affect the environment, that affect the climate. And we have been toying with piloting this course for the non-academia, from the county governments, national governments, and as well as getting students to do some community activities. Those are some of the projects that we have been working on, whether in our university or other universities, which are Planetary Health aligned. One Health for the Horn of Africa is another organization or institution that we've been working with. And with Horn, we have had, the objective is to advance the knowledge and research skills of research through workshops or short courses, summer school, and we have been lucky to participate in the Sandpit, and we have been also having some short courses that they have been running. And one of the short courses we are doing is a scientific writing workshop and also grant writing workshop. And with this, we have also had funding to do a project on COVID disease pandemic and the impact of mitigation measures on dietary diversity. And of course, preliminary results show that children are the most affected when it comes to such uncertainties within the household. So what are some of the challenges that we are facing with Planetary Health and One Health at the university, at Moy University? We see a diverging areas whereby One Health does work on this side and Planetary Health on this side. And we are thinking if there is a synergy or collaborative work among these two, then we are going to see a better, or collaboration. We are going to see a better approach in addressing One Health or other environmental circumstances and situations that are affecting us, and we can come up with ideas on how to bring students together on board, and we train a workforce that is better skilled and better informed in ways of managing and addressing situations that come. Because as we train students from School of Medicine, we train students from School of Public Health. Recently, we had students from sociology joining, and if we instill all that One Health concept, so looking at the environment, we're looking at the health of the animals, the health of the human beings in synergy, then we will be able to find solutions that are affecting children in the world today. Thank you.
Thank you both. I was very impressed by all of the information that was shared. I think that this is a great example of both the challenges and the opportunities that we face. Really an urgent call to action, I think, is what I take away from what has been shared. So I just want to apologize, Susan Keino. I was planning to read your introduction before your presentation. We had a little bit of a technical mix-up, but I'll go ahead and read that now so that everyone knows the context and more about you. And then I'll invite both Susan Prescott and Susan Keino just to share any ideas that are in your mind or responses after seeing each other's presentations, and then we will go into the question and answer. Thank you all for the active dialogue so far in the chat. We'll do our best to get everyone's questions that have been posed so far, and also invite everyone to give your feedback, give any questions, so that we know what you think about what has been shared. So Dr. Susan Keino is a lecturer at the School of Public Health for Moi University in Kenya. She is a member of the Kenya Nutritionist and Dietitians Institute, KNDI, and Africa Women in Science and Engineering, AWSE, and World Public Health Nutrition Association, WPHNA. She has a PhD in human nutrition from Maastricht University, the Netherlands. She has over 14 years teaching experiences in teaching, research, and outreach at Moi University School of Public Health. She is also a member of the Moi University and Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital Institutional Research Ethics Committee. She has published in refereed journals, participated in ongoing and completed research projects. She teaches both undergraduate and postgraduate students and supervises student projects and theses. Her research interest includes maternal and child nutrition, food and nutrition systems, food security, One Health, and planetary health, double burden of malnutrition and community disaster risk assessment. She has participated in several One Health and planetary health activities. So once again, that was both Susan Prescott and Susan Keino's presentations. And just before opening it up to the audience, I want to invite both Susan Prescott and Susan Keino. If you have anything that you would like to share, please feel free.
Thank you so much, and I really loved your presentation, Susan. As you were talking, something came to mind, and that was, it really, and I'm probably misquoting here, but it really takes a village to raise a child. And that's true the world over, yet I think we're failing horribly in that very basic thing. And so much of what you said really reinforced that. It really highlights that this is such a multidimensional problem, but it comes back to that village, that social cohesion that is becoming really fragmented. We're really losing that sense of community and looking after the children and raising the children. Really, if you think about it, it's really one of the most important, possibly the most important thing we need to do to survive. So I just really want to thank you for your really rich discussion of those factors.
Thank you so much, Susan, and I'm learning a lot from your presentation too. Your presentation skills are top-notch. I'm hoping that one day I'll be able to do such, because you did such an incredible job. And next, I just want to say that talking on matters children from your presentation, it's obvious that whatever children are going through today, it is our making as the custodians of this generation. And we ask ourselves the question, what are we leaving behind as for this generation that we are bringing up? And everything that the children are doing today, they are learning from us. What are we showing them? What are they learning from us? What legacy are we leaving them? So that tomorrow they'll be better custodians of the planet, and they can leave it to their, children and their grandchildren. So it's up to us to really rethink and shape our way of thinking and see it from the minds of the children and from the eyes of the children. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I echo all that has been shared. And so just a preview of what's to come, we invite everyone to stay on. Now comes in some ways the most fun part, where we get to know each other, hear each other as a real community. And basically, in a lot of ways, I think it's tapping into our ancestral instincts and sitting around the campfire, getting to know each other and dreaming dreams about helping the world to heal all that is broken, and to do that together. So if you can raise your hands, I'll defer to those of you who want to share questions yourself verbally, but I also want to try and respect the order of the questions that have been shared in the chat, and we'll go with that for now. But please feel free to come in so that this is an interactive and engaging dialogue. So the first question was from Tony Waterston to Susan Prescott, and there were a couple of questions. So in short, to try and summarize it, there are core preventive and health promotion skills which pediatricians and child health professionals are trained in, related to prevention of violence, promoting good nutrition, and also issues of climate change as a newer one. He raises the question about nature as a critical issue. Is there a place in our routine discussions, or is it more a matter of particular projects and programs? And then the follow-up question was building off of the 10 factors that Susan shared in the Canmore Declaration. These really require structural changes in society, which he fully supports. Is political change required to enable this rather than health promotion? So I'll invite Susan Prescott first, and then Susan Keino, if you also want to come in, feel free after Susan Prescott.
Well, thank you very much, Nathan. And thank you, Tony, for those really important points, which I really agree with. First of all, to the discussion of nature in the therapeutic session or any interaction that we have with families, I think it should be fundamentally part of an opportunity in every setting. Not just a research setting. In fact, we know that nature contact is really a very important and therapeutic with immediate benefits for children and families. So I think that it's probably a neglected part of what we do as pediatricians and child health advocates, is to actually talk about getting children out into nature. And there are now programs and people doing research, but also in practice, looking at green prescriptions for many, particularly in mental health, and it's being used in adults, for example, with PTSD and other conditions, but also children, particularly mental health, but also eating disorders and many other conditions where getting children out into nature, it has immediate mental health benefits. And of course, it's a wonderful way to bring families together as well. So I know clinicians who are actually writing down how much additional time the family might want to think about spending in nature. So absolutely, I don't want to go on too much, but I think that should be a really important part of what we do. The second thing, and also getting kids off screens. The second part of your question was about political change, and I was really trying to emphasize that as we think about environments, it really is everything, and the value systems and the social systems and the political systems, the economic systems are all part and parcel of what leads to health or disease in the long term. So I think that it really is trying to get to the roots of these problems, and yes, absolutely, that needs to include what we call important, what we call progress, what we call value. So I think that is a societal shift, and we've talked, many of you I've spoken to before, about how we need to shift values, normative values. So I think that's an essential part of this whole discussion. And it goes to so much of what Susan was talking about as well.
Yeah, maybe I can just add one thing about dietary habits that we are adopting today. It's quickly shaping the mental stability of our children. And I really liked what Susan said about, let's take our children outside, but also let's feed them well, because too much sugar, too much calorie content, too much, the children become very hyperactive, and we end up putting them on medication because we think they are, they have all these attention disorders, yet it's all got to do with just the food that we are feeding them. So let's expose them outside, let's take them outside and let them enjoy the environment that we are giving them, a safe environment at that.
If I could just also add that colleagues and friends in Hong Kong, to speak directly to what Susan's just said, Tonya Sobko and colleagues have done a wonderful research project looking at preschool children and doing quite intensive nature play programs with them over, I think it was a 10-week period. That include playing with food, and actually at the end of that time they had improvements in physical health, behaviour, sleep, and it also improved their attitudes to the environment and their parents as well. And thinking about places like Hong Kong, where it's not typically there isn't a lot of nature contact, but even small amounts can make a huge difference. So. And eating behaviours and food preferences so important by just connecting them to nature.
Thank you so much. So I'll read Edward Shore's question, but before getting to that, just want to also read a comment that was shared by Simon Lenton about the overlap between animal cruelty and child abuse. And to me, this really highlights how important connection and values are that's in much of our society and professional disciplines. We see the silos and the ways that conservation or climate are separated from human health. And so I think we have an opportunity to tap into the wisdom of our ancestors, who in many ways would have found it ridiculous and foolish that we now think that humans are not only separate from, but superior to the natural world and the other relations that we have in the web of life. And so it is very true that we can have co-benefits and tackle these challenges together and do right by both children and animals, both wild animals and animals that we have together in our homes and communities. So Edward Shore asked, is there any connection between the transmission of COVID from bats to humans and climate change? And then a comment that if there is such a connection, it may be a way to increase attention to climate change by tying COVID with climate. So please feel free to weigh in on this question.
Could you repeat the question, Nathan? I don't think I heard it well.
Yes, so basically, is there a connection between the transmission of COVID from bats to humans and climate change? If there is such a connection, it might be a way to increase attention to climate change.
I think there is already a discussion around how zoonotic diseases and climate change can be linked. The particular case of COVID is obviously a political discussion, and there is a lot of controversy around exactly the origins of COVID. I don't know if any other people on the call would like to comment on that specifically, but I think we need to have a really rich discussion around how all of these things are interconnected and try and depoliticize some of these things.
Yeah, I agree with you, Susan, that if there's any subject matter expert, they can weigh in on this. But what I'm going to say is that we are having a population that is adventurous. We are going into exotic diets, and you find that people are going into food that were not traditionally eaten. And therefore, we have moved, and also with the adventure, we find ourselves in caves and we are disturbing the birds in there and carrying out, from our footsteps and our shoes that we take into the caves and come back to our homes. We carry diseases back. And I talked about the issue of manure that we get from our farms, the farms that the Maasais, where the Maasais put their cattle, and then we bring it into our homesteads to use it in our gardens. So you find that our habits and our lifestyles are moving us into environments whereby we were not even going there before, and therefore we are bringing back diseases. So there's definitely a relationship between, COVID, environment, and what we are suffering from right now.
And I will certainly just add that there's a lot of intense grief in the world and a huge health crisis with COVID because it's been so acute. But there has been a much larger pandemic building in the background for decades, and it has not been given the same attention. And it wasn't really until 2011 that the United Nations recognized NCDs as the major global threat to human and economic development, including in developing countries as well. So, and it is that problem in itself that has made many populations so much more vulnerable to the effects of COVID. So again, we see all these interconnections here.
And just to echo that, if anyone in the audience has maybe a more definitive or specializes in this area, please feel free to comment or weigh in by unmuting yourself and then coming in. The next set of questions is from Una McFadden, and the first one is related to our current discussion, if there's a connection between indoor living and the spread of COVID. And then there was also a question shared earlier about if we should more closely have links between human and veterinary medicine to reduce ineffective use of antibiotics, insecticides, etc., as well as research into effects on the growing fetus and infant in all species. And then if I can find, there was another question by Una about should pediatricians take a more active role in questioning the highly processed food manufacturing that results in the cheap food mentioned in the first presentation, but seems little researched in relation to children's health. What is permitted in processed foods and how does the processing alter the microbiome effects? So I think this question in a lot of ways highlights the connections between both of your presentations. So would love to hear both of your comments about this topic.
There's a lot to unpack there. I'm not quite sure where to start, but maybe at the end with the ultra-processed foods. It's really a fundamental problem, I believe, on many fronts. There's the effects on the microbiome, there's the effects on the environment. There's so much burden in the underprivileged in terms of what you're displacing from the diet as well. And we also see the incredible impact of, sorry, just a minute. Apologies. Sorry, ultra-processed foods, yes. So we also, it's worth mentioning that these foods do alter the microbiome, and there's also pro-inflammatory alarmins in many of these processed foods that many of you know about, which are actually increasing inflammatory signals to the body. And also adding to another dimension to this story is the role of, I think you mentioned detergents and disinfectants. Another perspective that is becoming a lot more prominent now in terms of the rise of NCDs is the role that of modern compounds such as detergents, nanoparticles are actually affecting the tight junctions in the gut, the epithelial surfaces. So again, we're seeing another environmental threat that perhaps has been neglected in this bigger conversation. It's making us vulnerable to inflammation, it's making us prone to NCDs, but it's also arguably influencing our vulnerability to acute conditions like COVID-19. So that's a rather complex issue. There were lots of other things that you threw out there, Nathan. I'm trying to remember them all. Perhaps you could just flag one for me. You said, and then maybe Susan's got some other comments. There were indoor living, I think we talked about. Indoor living, obviously there is data suggesting that there is a greater risk of COVID spread indoors. But when we think about indoor living, there are many other factors there that are relevant to our modern life, the microbiome, endotoxin exposure, all of those things. So I'm not sure that it's easy to unravel in a simple answer. Perhaps you could maybe break down those questions again, or Susan could step in.
Maybe I can take up the one on pediatricians taking up an active role in research for children. And yes, I'm going to say that it's not just pediatricians alone. Everybody actually should take a big role in looking at the impacts of all these additives that we put in our foods on children, the processed foods and carcinogens, not only on just children, also on us. It's only that the children have a weak immune system and they're more vulnerable, but everyone should take an active role, sociologists, everyone, to look at even the mental health, what we are exposing our children to in terms of TVs and media, and what is how it's going to affect their lives in the long run. So everyone should take an active role on doing research on children.
And I think just briefly, there was a follow-up comment from Una about the opportunity to work together between human health and veterinary medicine. And I think that Susan Keino, the connection between Moy University and University of Toronto is an example of a collaboration that is very scalable, sometimes having the proof of concept and to know that there are places, and I know also in Tanzania, there are projects that are connecting veterinary students with nurses, doctors, public health students. So I think it's just a matter of really being bold and recognizing that this is the way that things should be, and then moving forward to make it happen. So if any thoughts about other ways to do that, but I think that was very effectively highlighted in your work, Susan Keino.
Yes, maybe I can just emphasize that where I am right now, we are having the postgraduate students, and we've drawn from two universities, Moi and University of Nairobi. And here we have sociologists, we have medical doctors, we have nurses, we have dentists, we have so many other cadres, vets. And it's amazing how when they start talking to each other and breaking those silos whereby the vets only talk to themselves and the doctors talk to themselves, they start working in synergies. And we saw when we went out into the communities, they're able to address challenges that affect the community as one. And when they're being addressed, they are addressed as, people who are out there to help the community overcome the challenges that they are going through. And more so in areas whereby the wild animals come into contact with the humans and also domestic animals. There's a lot of diseases that cross from one species to another, and it is an opportune time that we think of breaking those silos and bringing all these professions together.
So thank you for the very rich discussion. I think we will have a good opportunity in breakout rooms to continue some of the threads of the discussion, but I just want to quickly paraphrase some of Tony and Lucy, the comments that questions about political questions and capitalism and really values related to consumption and materialism. And I do think that Planetary Health is a perfect space to really emphasize that these divisions are not inherent. We are all part of one global community of life, and making it so that we see ourselves as members of one human family on one shared home, and using that kind of unifying language hopefully makes it so that a lot of the damage and pathology that all of us carry with us, that we can heal from that and move forward together, especially for children. So I just want to invite everyone in approximately 1 month, Thursday, September 23rd, we will have our last of the series of webinars, and the topic will be COP26 and the child health community mobilizing together with children and youth for bold climate action. So I'll go ahead and paste that in the chat and turn it back over to either Jeff or Miguel to put us into breakout rooms. And again, thank you all, and emphasize that hopefully this is just the beginning and that we'll remain connected. Thank you all.
Let me